Today's video is brought to you by Shaker and Spoon, a monthly cocktail subscription box. More on them in just a bit. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Casual Criminalist. As always, hi there, I'm your host Simon. Welcome to the show. What happens here if you're new? The format is one of my writers. This time Emma has written me a script. Thank you, Emma. We're going to read it together and then fantastic editor on this show, Jen, is going to edit it, and that's what we do here. Just again, I don't know if I need to explain this every time, but I've not read this before. We go on a little exploration together, don't we now? Let's crack on. This is Killing for the Greater Good, the Krugersdorp murders. I do wonder with Killing for the Greater Good. It's usually in these situations, it's not someone who's like some Dexter character, you know, from the TV show, and he's out there killing actually evil people. Usually it's someone who's like a little bit insane and they're like, God whispers to me. You know, what's that famous quote? If you talk to God, that's okay. If God talks to you, that's a problem. You know? Usually I feel like it's these guys. We've covered all sorts of crimes here on The Casual Criminalist, ranging from the odd and slightly bizarre to the maniacal, bloodthirsty, and even horrific. So much so that it's a wonder Simon doesn't suffer from constant nightmares. How do you know, Emma? Mine dreams. Nah, I have to say, I'm not someone who generally gets I've had a couple of nightmares. Maybe even just... there's only one nightmare that I'm not going to share it with you. But there's one nightmare that really sticks with me, but most of the time I think I even generally have just generally dreamless sleep. I'm usually super tired and it's like time for bed. I read half a page of a book and then I immediately fall asleep. My script app has told me something went wrong. Try again later, which is a brilliant start to today's episode. Thank you. How about we try that again, shall we? There we go. Sorry, technical issues. But no other case or series of crimes that I've heard of, neither locally or abroad, comes close to the bizarre and often mind-boggling details of what would collectively become known as the Krugersdorp murders. It's a baffling story about the Church of Satan and people who are desperately trying to escape a life in the occult of sadistic riches and dark rituals of vampires and werewolves and of the unwilling bride of Satan and a group of people who tried to save her soul. This sounds like a premise for a TV show rather than an episode of a true crime podcast. It's also a story of how a narcissistic, psychopathic liar managed to convince a small group of people that she was indeed a witch and that it was God's plan that they had to commit murder for the sake of the greater good. I told you. It's never it's never a Dexter character. Even, I can't remember the details of it, but I'm pretty sure we did an episode called The Dexter Murderer or whatever. And it was no, he wasn't actually murdering evil people. He was just a f***ing psycho, because of course he was. It's never this. It's always someone who's there's some weird god going on. I've thought long and hard about how to explain the details of this case. Most of the coverage of the court case, as well as a local documentary series, focused on the occult aspects of the case, referring to them as the satanic or cult murders. They refer to them as such things, not because it's necessarily accurate or correct, but probably for the same reason that text might very well be in the thumbnail of this episode, because it really gets people to click. And it doesn't matter if you're a fact boy making true crime videos on YouTube or whether you're, the BBC. They're always after that click. But after listening to local journalist Jana Marx's book, The Krugersdorp Cult Killings, and doing my own research, I've decided to try and explain the real-world motivations of the group who called themselves God's Chosen, because from both my research and the testimonies of the accused themselves, it's clear that this is just another example of like-minded people finding each other and making up their own reasons for why they did the things they did. So, buckle up, dear viewer or listener. This story makes the Manson family murders seem like child's play. Oh, good. So everything I said, it does genuinely surprise me that I don't have worse nightmares, considering the shit that we talk about on this bloody podcast. But I just don't. But I get the Manson family is that is one of the worst. Hey now, I'm all around you. And this, except for Pedro Lopez, we always come back to Pedro Lopez. The Road to Hell and Good Intentions, but this one's probably one that's going to give me nightmares, isn't it? Brilliant. Thanks, Emma. The Road to Hell and Good Intentions. Krugersdorp is a satellite town that lies on the western edge of Johannesburg, South Africa, in an area that is commonly referred to as West Rand. Historically, Krugersdorp's main industry was gold mining, but these days its residents are mostly professionals who work in the nearby cities of Johannesburg and Pretoria. I remember I made a video once, and it was like, we said like Johannesburg was the capital of South Africa. And many people in the comments be like, Simon, it's actually Pretoria. What are you, small brains? And it's like, well, yeah, everyone thinks of South Africa and you think of Johannesburg, don't you? I mean, it's like the big city. My grandma actually lives in Johannesburg, of all places. I've never been there. I've never been to see her, which is, I don't know, probably not brilliant grandson, behavior, is it? Now she's really old, though. She probably doesn't know who I am anymore.
That's so sad.
This got really sad. Let's move on. Jesus Christ. Way to bring down the room, Simon. I mean, although that's kind of what you're here for, isn't it?
Goddamn right.
In the early 2000s, Satanism and the occult was a big talking point in the religious community, where you might have attended talks on the dangers of drugs and the practicing of safe sex. I remember police officers coming to our school to warn us about the dangers of the occult, what to look out for, and the importance of avoiding anything that had to do with the occult or Satanism itself. Welcome to freedom of religion. If you want to be a Satanist, it's like, go for it. I mean, isn't most Satanism's got to be like, it sounds weird to say. It sounds like slightly oxymoronic, but like harmless devil worship. I feel this is more, it's not people like sacrificing children. It's just like alternative kids with, dark hair and baggy jeans. Like goths. Is goth still a thing? It was a thing when I was at school. I wasn't a goth. But, there were people who were like gothy. It always seems like a bit too much effort for me. So why would I? Well, it's a lot of effort. Can't I just wear jeans and a t-shirt like a normal person? I don't mean that goths aren't normal, but oh God, dig yourself a hole, Simon. Why don't you? Let's just move on. That included certain rock and metal bands, horror movies, PC games, the devil's work, and even children's books like the Harry Potter series. Oh my God, this is too much. Stop it. As with most taboo things in life, the idea of the occult fascinated a lot of people. And in 2006, a woman by the name of I've got a pronunciation guide here. Ria like Maria. Oh, I nailed it. And Grunewald. Ria Grunewald came to believe that it was her purpose in life to gather an army on behalf of God so that she would be able to fight Satanism wherever she could find it. Sounds like just a regular, isn't this, if you described a preacher as someone who gathers together an army or a group of people on behalf of God, so that they'd be able to fight Satanism, I mean, they're not, actively fighting Satanism, but they are, anti-satanic. Isn't religion's got to be, anti-satanic, right? Okay, she should have just said, she should have just gone to Bible school, pastoral college. What's that called where you go to divinity school? That sounds like something from Harry Potter. What's this cool where you go to study the Bible to be a reverend or a pastor or a preacher or a priest? Why are there so many names for this? I'm sure it's because there's 700 different branches of Christianity and it's they all have the different ones. I don't know. I went to a religious school and the guy who was in charge was called Father so-and-so. It's like Father John or Father Paul. But I think they were a reverend. They wore a collar. I don't even know what... I went to this school for 7 years, and I do not know what branch of Christianity it was. I couldn't tell you. I assume it's just generic UK Christianity, which is it Protestantism? Like Church of England? Everyone in the UK is probably like, Simon, how dumb can you possibly be? But it's not that I'm dumb. I mean, I'm dumb as well, but it's also that I just don't care.
He's a nihilist.
Ria would eventually establish a ministry called Overcomers Through Christ and told the people who attended her Bible study groups that it's the duty of Christians to act as God armies on earth and we can't allow ourselves to remain ignorant to the dangers the occult posed. She trained to become a trauma counselor in order to help the survivors of satanic ritual abuse and became known as an authority on helping people escape the occult. So far, so good. This sounds like, okay, so she started a group, she's like a pastor or whatever, and she gathers people together to be all religious-y. Fine, that sounds good. Even better, becoming a trauma counsellor to help counsel people who survived abuse.
Meeting in a bar after a Led Zeppelin concert.
Amazing, this person sounds great. I get the feeling that it's not going to end that way and my opinion's going to change as they turn into an absolute psychopath. Because, of course, you're listening to an episode of The Casual Criminalist. It's what happens here. Thank you. Leave a review. And that is how Rhea met Cecilia Stain, self-proclaimed 42nd generation witch who claimed to have been chosen as a bride of Satan and who needed Rhea's help in order to escape the evil witches who were hunting her. Sounds like you've been reading too many fiction books, and also you need the help of not just a counselor, you need the help of someone who can, whip out that prescription pad, to be honest. Finally, here was someone who confirmed everything that Rhea believed to be true about the Church of Satan. This is a crazy person. This is not proof. And soon it's like someone who comes up and says, mate, the earth is flat. She'll be like, oh my God, I guess it is. How do you know it's flat? It's like I'm a 42nd generation earth scientist. Okay. Color me convinced.
People are crazy.
She believed everything Cecilia told her about the Church of Satan and how they worked against Christianity. And together the two women presented a workshop called Know Your Enemy, presenting Cecilia's lies as fact and gaining a following of devout Christians who religiously attended the Know Your Enemy courses, found themselves fascinated by the existence of an actual honest-to-goodness satanic witch, and who believed that, with Cecilia's help, they could make a difference in the war against evil. This is such a scam. I hate this about religion. Like, I'm generally like, believe what you want to believe. I'll make fun of it. Like, that's kind of my... some people hit me up on Twitter and be like, Simon, it's not funny and it's not harmless. And I'm like, honestly, it's pretty harmless. Like, you do what you want, I'll do what I want. It's called freedom, And more often than not, it's like, I don't know, like Americans, I'm like, aren't you like the ones who are like big into freedom? Apparently not. It's like, literally, they just... what's that? It's the super famous... I'm recording this. I'm sorry you're seeing like 6 months because we're so far ahead recorded, but they just overturned the Roe versus Wade. And I'm like... and it always seems to be like, yeah, freedom. Wait, this isn't freedom. I don't want to get cancelled, like not cancelled, but I don't like getting political, but it does seem strange that, America, you're always like, yeah, freedom for everyone. Freedom, freedom, freedom. And it's like, except with a woman and her body. Like, what are you doing? This isn't politics. Let's carry on. I'm sorry. Let's carry on. This is the reason I don't talk about politics. Is one, I don't really care about it. I don't think it's as important as everyone thinks it is. And two, because it's like, whatever you choose, there's a large group of people who are going to hate you. So, but with stupid shit like this, come on. It's obvious what this answer should be. So can we just, come on. Cecilia told Rhea that her life was constantly in danger and that her house suffered because of it. She would make up elaborate stories about protective spells and death curses and people listening in on their conversations through astral projection. The gullible Rhea was constantly at her side in order to help keep her safe, praying for her, caring for her, bringing her food and clothing and supporting her financially. Oh my God, this was the point I wanted to make. I'm sorry, I just went on a total rant. What I wanted to say is like the financial exploitation of religion, or the exploitation of religion for financial gain, is insane. Like these telepreachers flying around on their jets saying that they're... why can't you ride commercial? Because it is filled with demons. Oh, God.
Well, that sounds actually like a demon.
I went too far with that one. Yeah, dude, you're just ripping people off. It's like people, you're worse than even the scam people who are like the crypto scams and all of this shit, which is a whole thing on YouTube that I love to follow. It's so addictive. People are such pieces of shit. And speaking of that, have you bought my Simon coin yet? Not really. Cecilia claimed that she was unable to keep a job due to her ill health and inability to leave the immediate area around her apartment building due to the protective spells that had been cast around her. On days when Rhea was unable to care for Cecilia, members from Overcomers Through Christ would offer to babysit her, and by 2012, the 30-year-old Cecilia had built her own little cult inside of Rhea's ministry. These members included Candice Rayevek, a small business owner, Zach Valentine, a successful financial broker, and his wife, Michaela, who also worked as a travel agent while studying to become a pastor herself. The most dedicated member of the group, however, was Marinda Stain, a divorced yet beloved high school teacher who would often bring her daughter, Marcel, and her son, LaRue, along when she was visiting Cecilia. I feel like there's a bit of a slip there, Emma. A divorced, yet beloved. Despite the fact that she's divorced, she could still be loved. No, she cannot. Divorce is a sin. She is a demon.
You having fun?
Cecilia's little cult would form the basis of the group, who would later become known as Electus per Deus, and who would be held responsible for the gruesome murders of 11 people. Oh my god, did we just take it up a notch or what? I'm glad I got all my joking and asides out from the beginning, because when it's like, you know, religious-driven murders of people they think are devil worshipping, it's always like, oh my god, it's really hard to like add my commentary because it just feels callous. So let's crack on. The Wicked Witch of the West Rand. Members of Overcomers Through Christ would meet at Cecilia's apartment on so-called high nights, nights when she claimed she would be more susceptible to the curses that the evil witches were casting against her. The group would listen to gospel songs and bear witness to Cecilia as she suffered fits that caused her eyes to roll back in her head and had blood pouring from her mouth. The fits would end with her crying and begging for death. All the while, the group chanted prayers around her and quoted Bible verses at her. The solution for this is medicine and or possibly just ignoring her. Because, like, I guess she's biting her tongue, and, I mean, obviously you can roll your eyes into your head. It's not exactly challenging. She's biting her tongue or whatever to get the blood going. And it's like, would she be doing that if she wasn't getting all this attention and this chanting and this, like, free shit from living in this person's church? I'm going to say, well, yes, obviously, if she's mentally disturbed. But also, I think there's a little bit of manipulation going on here, maybe. Just maybe, possibly, what? Later, Candace would testify that Cecilia would make little bags of fake blood that she would surreptitiously place in her mouth before faking a fit. Or you could just do that if you like your tongue, I guess. Biting on it in order to make her fit seem more gruesome. Well, there we go. That's the con element, isn't it? Her displays became more dramatic as more members joined a little prayer circle, and Cecilia's claims to fame became more elaborate as well. Cecilia claimed that apart from being a very powerful witch, she was also a vampire, a werewolf, and the ability to read minds and astral project. I feel like these would be things that were fairly easy to proof. Like, what am I thinking of? What am I thinking of? And she's like, I don't know. And you'll be like, it's a toasted cheese sandwich. It's not even hard. I skipped breakfast today. So I'm really hungry. I went to the doctor and they were like, you got real high cholesterol fact, boy. You got to get your shit together. So I'm doing a little bit of fasting. I'm trying to eat healthier. He's like, you have to exercise. And I'm like, but I don't like it. Stupid body. She also claimed to have dissociative personality disorder and that she had over 1,000 personalities living within her. She claimed that one of her personalities, a 4-year-old girl named Anja, was the main target of the evil witch's attacks, since she represented everything that was good and pure about Cecilia, and would use Anja to endear herself to the people around her. Whenever she met someone new, however, Cecilia would always aim to establish herself as more intelligent or prestigious than a new acquaintance. In other words, if you were a teacher, she used to be a professor. If you were a doctor, she was a surgeon. And if you were a lawyer, she was a god.
What?
It reminds me of that brilliant sketch. Do you guys know Mitchell and Webb? I mean, anyone from the UK listening must be like, yes. Anyone from, I don't know if it's crossed the pond, but there's this brilliant sketch of these. It feels a bit like Steely to just tell someone else's joke. But there's this guy, and he's at like a dinner party, and he uses any excuse to bring up the fact. It's like, you know, someone will say something like, oh, work was really hard today. He's like, oh, I bet it was. Not as hard as my work. And they're like, oh, what do you do? And he's like, well, I happen to be a brain surgeon. And he'll say it like in the sketch like 7 times, but like, well, it's not as difficult as brain surgery, is it? Which is what I happen to do. And then someone else arrives at the party, and they're like, oh, David, have you met Michael? And, or I guess Mitchell. I can't remember which way. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Simon. Just tell the story. He's like, have you met Michael? It's like, oh, no, I haven't. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. What do you do, Michael? And he's like, well, I just got back from NASA. It's like, oh, why? It's like, oh, I just happen to be a rocket scientist. And then, no, I spoiled the joke. I ruined the joke. Come on, Simon, get it together. And he's like, the other guy's like, well, probably not as challenging as brain surgery. And the guy's like, oh, it might be. I'm a rocket scientist. I spoiled the joke totally, but you get the premise, right? It's very funny. That's why I don't do sketch comedy, and I just read other people's scripts.
That was hilarious. Don't look at me. It was funny.
I might be exaggerating a little bit about the God part, but it fits Cecilia's overall impression of herself. Cecilia also told members of the Overcomers Through Christ about a secret orphanage that was full of children whose families had tried to escape the Church of Satan. The orphanage was hidden in a forest in the United States, and only a handful of few people knew about it. With her ability to astral project, of course, Cecilia had found out where this orphanage was, and she told the members of Overcomers Through Christ that they needed to donate money in order to ensure the safety and well-being of the children living there. All of those donations, of course, had to be made directly into Cecilia's bank account. She would then ensure reached the orphanage on their behalf. Am I right? Yeah, right. Please. It's unclear how many members of Overcomers Through Christ believed their story, but it later became known that Zach and Michaela would give her more than 100,000 rand every month. To put that into perspective, that's the annual salary of an entry-level job in South Africa. Oh my god. That's insane. This was the financial broker. It must be. That's some mad money. How much is that in dollars? Hey Siri, how much is 100,000 South African rand in US dollars? Me? That's $6,000 a month. Wait, so the average annual salary for an entry-level job in South Africa is 72 grand a year, American? That cannot be right. Did I read that right? More than 100,000? Oh no, I'm sorry. That's per year. Wait, that seems very low. I don't know. Wait, so an entry-level job is $6,000? I guess South Africa is not exactly rich, but is it? I don't know. I don't know enough about this, but that does seem very low. Marinda, on a more modest teacher salary of just 25,000 rand a month, could offer a lot less, but she still paid Cecilia what she could. Candice also donated large amounts of money and crippled herself financially in an effort to please the demanding Cecilia, leading to the loss of her business. And all the while, Rio was still supporting Cecilia financially, paying her for whatever medical treatments she claimed to need. But doesn't she have? She's got some mad money. She's got like 6 grand a month coming in from one person. The members of Overcomers Through Christ, who were now a part of Cecilia's inner circle, would bask in Cecilia's love and attention, and soon they were all immensely loyal to her. In Candice's own words, while we did whatever Cecilia wanted, we were given that fulfillment of having somebody in our lives, somebody special, somebody that we could help. Everything you craved, you got, and then you'd do one tiny little thing wrong. The rug, actually, the whole world is pulled from underneath you, and you are made out to be the scum of the planet. She knew each person in a group so well, she knew how to break each of us perfectly. This is so like ultra classic, psychopathic, narcissist. I'm not an expert. This is called the casual criminalist for a reason. I don't know but like from doing other episodes, psychopathic, narcissistic, manipulative. She's ticking all of those boxes right now, right? People from outside the group had noticed the change that was taking place in the members of Overcomers Through Christ who were closest to Cecilia. Michaela Valentine's mother, Ilse van Dijk, would later testify that her daughter and son-in-law got sucked into Cecilia's world and that the change in their personalities were obvious to anyone around them. It's as if they'd lost the ability to reason for themselves and everything in their lives started to revolve around Cecilia. So, you enjoying today's episode? Maybe you're not. It's a true crime show. Maybe you're like, oh, Simon, there's so much horror. Well, you could take that edge off that horror with today's sponsor, one of my absolute favorites, Shaker and Spoon, which are a monthly cocktail subscription box. They send out one of these every month, and it allows you to make a bunch of different cocktails. 12 in all, 4 from each recipe. So I have the Año Let's Go box, which is a type of tequila. And then in here, you get 3 different recipe cards, details on how to make everything. But most importantly, all you need to bring is a box of tequila, Año tequila in this case. And then everything else is provided in here. And it is complicated. This box is full of stuff from everything, pink grapefruit for one of them. There's coconut water on the other. These are kind of the bigger items. And then you get this super specific stuff. Like this is rose syrup. And this is spiced mojo syrup. And this is cinnamon demerara syrup. And all of these are used. You'll soon be making this, not this cocktail. I took a different box home because I needed one for here and one for home. So it won't exactly look the same, but it's cool. You get what's going on. But cooler than all that, you get all these tiny little ones. Look at all of these. And these are super specific, like spiced lemon oil. And it's in a little spray thing. I believe I've done this with an orange one before. You just onto the top of each cocktail. And little Worcester bitters, the bitter housewife, aromatic bitters, everything you need. So you're not buying a giant box of bitters that are too specific that you're never going to use or probably honestly can't even find. Look, I love drinks. I love cocktails. I love wine. I love it all. And I love making cocktails at home. I've got I've got the shaker. I've got all the glasses. I've collected them over time. And whether it's just me and my wife or friends, family come round, I'll make up some cocktails. It's always a good time. It's a right laugh. And yeah, this is honestly one of my favorite sponsors. And I love that I get sent all this stuff and can make these cocktails. And I think you'll love it too. I think I've hit most of the talking points here. They say I could be pretty loose with them as long as I get the points across, which I always love from a sponsor. Thank you, Shaker and Spoon. They are definitely going to want me to tell you what the link is, though, so let me find that. Here we go. Just go to shakerandspoon.com/criminalist to get a $20 off coupon at checkout, which is brilliant. Help support the show. You'll love it. Make one up. Listen to the next episode while you're sipping on a cocktail. What could be better? Link below. Back to the show. Electus per Deus. I think that's right. Deus pronunciation, that Dutch word. I was thinking about Dutch because all of this looks like Dutch, like the Van Dijk and all of that stuff. But Latin is what I meant. Different language. Really different. A mentor of Rhea's, Pastor Reginald Ben Dixon, finally managed to convince Rhea that her workshop, Know Your Enemy, was too focused on Satanism. Together they worked on a new workshop, Know Your Saviour, in order to make God the centre of her ministry again. Of course, this made Cecilia's experience with the occult obsolete. Where she was once the centre of attention at these Know Your Enemy talks and workshops, she was now pushed aside and had to listen as Rhea praised the disciples of the Bible for their loyalty and commitment to God. Good, that sounds like a much better way to go, to be honest. She was no longer required to help present these workshops and realised that she was no longer at the centre of Rhea's universe. This led to Rhea and Cecilia having a fallout. Narcissistic. And Rhea stopped taking care of Cecilia, focusing all her attention on a new workshop instead. Cecilia would tell the members of Overcomers Through Christ who had stayed behind to continue taking care of her. The Rhea had left the path that God had chosen for her, that it would end badly for all of them, and that Rhea's actions would lead to more deaths at the hands of the Church of Satan. I really hope that this is Rhea's exit from this story and that she doesn't get involved anymore, because she seemed nice. She was the one at the beginning who was like the trauma counselor and all of this stuff, and she got misled. She just got misled and manipulated with this Church of Satan stuff, and now she's back to just being a good old religious person. Generally doing good, it seems. Candace, who at this point was dating Cecilia, understood Rhea's motivation for changing the focus of her course, and it opened her eyes to the lies that Cecilia was spewing about Rhea. Candace ended up leaving Cecilia, needing to distance herself from her and her inner circle. This enraged Cecilia even more, and she came up with more and more elaborate lies to force Rhea back to her side. Rhea didn't fall for it this time, completely distancing herself from Cecilia, and Cecilia started to work against Rhea by turning her inner circle against her and forming her own ministry, calling it Electus per Deus, which is Latin for chosen by God. The 5 remaining members of Cecilia's inner circle had the words Electus per Deus tattooed on their bodies, and now they committed themselves to Cecilia and the mission that God had provided her with to end the false ministry that was Overcomers Through Christ. Oh God. So instead of going after the Satanists or whatever, or just manipulating people for more money, she's going to go back, oh God, these are the people who are going to get murdered, isn't it? It's going to be this other just nice religious group instead of the psycho religious group. Why? Come on. Oh, it's called, the next section's called the bloody Revenge Murders. Oh, for f***'s sake. I mean, I know it's like someone's going to get murdered in this episode, but does it have to be this person who just got suckered into this like Satan thing and seems to be a genuinely good person? The bloody Revenge Murders. After distancing herself from Cecilia and members of Electus per Deus, Rhea continued to host Bible studies at her apartment that was only a few blocks away from the apartment building where both Cecilia and the Stein family lived. On one of these nights, the members of Overcomers Through Christ heard terrified screams outside of Rhea's apartment and found Cecilia lying in the middle of the road, bleeding from a fake stab wound. Not long after that, Rhea started receiving threatening text messages that claimed that the attack on Cecilia was her fault and that the Church of Satan was closing in on Cecilia and would kill her now that Rhea wasn't protecting her anymore. Rhea, now paranoid, started hosting her Bible study nights in secret, but during one of those sessions, petrol bombs exploded in the parking lot. At this point, it'd be like, I wonder who this is. Is it the Church of Satan or the person I've heavily slighted? Go to the police, maybe? The petrol bombs, it's time. Let's go. When the members of Overcomers Through Christ eventually made their way outside in order to determine what was going on, they found that their tires had been slashed. Soon after, a church that was run by one of the members of Overcomers Through Christ was torched, and Rhea started to withdraw herself from life, hiding from the evil witches that she was now sure were hunting her as well. This campaign of terror hadn't had the desired effect, and Cecilia became more determined to take revenge on Rhea. She decided to target those closer to Rhea and set her sights on the 33-year-old Natasha Berger. Where is the police? A church has been torched. People are being... It's not called bullying when it's criminal. What's it called? Assault? No. Harassment. Come on. Where's your brain today, Simon? Natasha was one of the more dedicated members of Overcomers Through Christ, a close friend of Rhea's, and had assisted Rhea when she had compiled both the Know Your Enemy and the Know Your Saver manuals. Cecilia found out that Natasha had written a prayer called the Dangerous Prayer that was aimed at praying for the children living at the fictitious orphanage that Cecilia was supposedly supporting financially. This prayer was read at one of Rhea's workshops, and Cecilia convinced the members of Electus per Deus that the prayer had resulted in the deaths of 170 children living in this orphanage. Because of this, Natasha was obviously an agent of evil, and Cecilia would quote verses from the Bible in order to convince the others that in times of war, death was necessary, and if they were to stop Rhea's false ministry, Natasha had to die.
These people are so weird.
This is the problem. You can find... The Bible's really long, so you can find all sorts of stuff in there that will support all sorts of crazy arguments. And also, not to mention, the Old Testament's pretty wild, to be honest. Like, there's some crazy shit going on in there. I mean, New Testament too, but the Old Testament's like, what's up, guys? Don't follow the lessons from there when it's like, in times of war, death is... Civilians must die. No, just don't. And don't stop twisting it, crazy Bible people. Natasha had to die, and this is where I became convinced that the members of Electus per Deus were willing participants in everything that followed. You can claim manipulation up to a point, but as you'll soon see, a reasonable person reaches a point where they tell themselves, alright, this has gone far enough. Marcel Stain, who was only 14 years old at this point, would later testify in court that his mother and Zach had planned exactly how they were going to go about murdering Natasha. Mirinda, Marcel, Zach, and Michaela drove to Pretoria, making their way to Natasha's apartment. Marcel was sent to go and knock on Natasha's door and had to spray pepper spray in Natasha's face once she was let inside, giving Mirinda and Zach the opportunity to disable Natasha and kill her. Marcel recounted that they'd all agreed that they could turn around at any point and abandon their plan. On the way to Pretoria, Michaela was telling her husband that they shouldn't be doing this and that what they were doing was wrong, but Zach kept on driving. Once they'd reached the apartment complex where Natasha lived, Marcel knocked on Natasha's door and claimed that her cat was inside. This is one of those things where it's like, yes, there's got to be a point where, like, when you're murdering someone, you got to be like, oh my god, this has gone too far. But it's also like, people get crazy manipulated. It's just wild how powerful that can be. Now, my theory is that Natasha, having been a member of Overcomers Through Christ for years, recognized Marcel and realized who she was. Natasha was also aware of the threats that had been made against Rhea, and Natasha, like most of the remaining members of Overcomers Through Christ, had suspected that Cecilia was behind all of the attacks that had been made against members of the group. So wisely, Natasha refused to open the security gate that would have allowed Marcel to enter her apartment and calmly told her that she hadn't seen a cat, closing the door in Marcel's face. Yeah, this is one thing, like South Africa, it's like everything's very secure. Like you wander around, there's like electric fences, there's barbed wire, there's security gates. It's all very intense. So in this case, great, keep out the psychos. Marcel then returned to where the others were waiting, reported that Natasha was too curious and that their plan was not going to work. On the 26th of July, 2012, Zach and Michaela returned to the apartment complex where Natasha lived. Instead of going to Natasha's apartment, they knocked on her neighbor's door. The 63-year-old Joy Bonzaya opened her door to find the charming, smiling couple outside. Michaela explained that they were friends of Natasha and that they were surprising her for her birthday. Since Natasha wasn't home yet, would it be possible for them to wait inside of Joy's flat until she returned? Joy agreed, and as soon as they were inside her apartment, Zach turned on the older lady and threatened her with a knife. They had to write a note to Natasha asking her to come over the moment she got home, and Michaela dropped the note off at Natasha's front door. Am I a dickhead? Or, because if someone was like, I am aware of my neighbors, I don't really know them, we've never, had tea or anything, just hello in the corridor or, just friendly chat. But if someone came round, knocked on my door and was like, oh, I'm waiting for your neighbours to come home because it's their birthday. Do you mind if I just hang out in your apartment? I'll be like, alternatively, you could f*** off.
That's my boy.
I don't mean to be like hostile. I mean, I wouldn't say it like that. I'd be like, no, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of something. But you're not my neighbour. You're someone who's saying you're a friend of my neighbour's. We don't know each other. What are we going to do? Sit at the dining room table, have a cup of tea and talk about the weather? That's absurd. What are you doing? And that's why I've never been murdered. They had her write a note to Natasha asking her to come over the moment she got home, and Michaela dropped the note off at Natasha's front door. Zach took Joy to her bedroom and slit her throat, leaving her for dead on the carpeted floor. Oh my god. Well, this just stepped up a gear. He then placed her yapping dog into a cupboard and closed it inside, pulling the bedroom door closed behind him. Michaela and Zach waited for Natasha in the small sitting room. Due to Michaela's earlier reluctancy to murder Natasha, Cecilia had ordered that Michaela had to prove her dedication and loyalty to Electus per Deus by being the one to murder Natasha. But from where they sat in the lounge, Michaela could hear Joy's death gurgles in the bedroom, and she was becoming more and more insistent that what they were doing was wrong. Zach calmed her, and when Natasha finally showed up, the pair was waiting for her. As soon as Natasha stepped through the door and recognized the couple, she started fighting back. Michaela ran back to the car, panicked and crying, and Zach eventually overpowered Natasha and stabbed her to death multiple times, riddling her chest with stab wounds. He then placed the knife in a plastic bag, closed the front door, and headed back to the car. The note that Joy had written was still clutched in Natasha's hand when a neighbor found her. The newspapers reported that elements of the occult were involved in the murders, since copies of both the Know Your Enemy and Know Your Savior manuals were found in Natasha's apartment. The police questioned members of Overcomers Through Christ regarding the possibility that Natasha was involved in a cult, and more than one person pointed a finger at Cecilia Stain. However, no arrests were made. Police? Why not? If there are multiple people pointing their fingers at someone as a potential murderer, maybe just go have a chat. Be like, look, we're not sure if you murdered them. That's for the courts that's for us to decide, and then for the courts to decide as well. There's plenty of protection in place. Why don't we just go have a chat? Just see if it could be them, because it is. In this case, it is. Come on, police. Already disappointed. Almost a month after the murders of Natasha and Joy, Rhea received a text message that read, "Hi Rhea, have you said goodbye to Reg? I hope you have." What are you doing? You texting your plans? If Reg shows up murdered, definitely, go to the police and say, look, I got this message about Reg's life being in danger. The police are probably going to do dick all about it, but Reg is eventually going to get murdered, because this is how the story goes. And when that happens, show them the message again. Rhea's mentor, Reginald Bendixson, was next on Cecilia's list. He'd always tried to convince Rhea to abandon Cecilia, and it wasn't difficult to convince the others that he was the cause of Rhea's abandonment of her true mission in life. Zach was now a favourite of Cecilia's, but she didn't trust Michaela. Marinda, wanting to curry favour with Cecilia, oh my god, there's so many characters, I'm a little bit lost. But there's Rhea and her, Cecilia, who's the bad one, and her little crew of followers along. Some who are super into it, some who are less into it. Marinda, wanting to curry favour with Cecilia, offered to murder Reg herself, and even offered to take Marcel along once more so that she could learn how it's done. On the 13th of August 2012, Zach and Marinda were both dressed as police officers when they picked Marcel up from school and then made their way to Reg's house. He opened the front door and met Marinda outside, and she explained that they were investigating Natasha and Joy's deaths and had a few questions for him. Marcel stood a little ways behind her mother, and she watched as Zach walked up behind Reg and hit him over the head with an axe. Hell. You actually became a literal axe murderer. That's some horror movie shit right there. I hope you kept that text message. The 14-year-old girl then had to stand and watch as her mother fell to her knees next to Reg's body and started stabbing him with a knife over and over and over. Yeah, that kid's going to be fine. I'm sure that's okay. They're not going to need years of therapy. Oh my god. Zach kept on attacking Reg with his axe, and soon both of them were covered in blood while a terrified Marcel watched as her mother stabbed Reg once more through his throat to ensure that he was dead. You hit him in the head with an axe and stabbed him multiple times. He's dead. Oh, is he dead? The group returned to Cecilia's flat and reported to her that Reg was now dead as well, and soon the news spread that the murders of Natasha and Reg were connected. No, How did you figure that out, police? Members of Overcomers Through Christ were interrogated by police, and once again all fingers were pointed towards Cecilia, at which point the police arrested her, sent her to court, where she was convicted of multiple murders and jailed. No, not really. I made that up. I don't know what happens, but it's not going to be that, is it? It's not going to be that. We know it's not. Because we're not even halfway through today's story, depressingly. I mean, not depressingly. I enjoy reading these things, but f***ing hell. The detective on the case, Detective Johan van Wijk, approached Ria in order to get some more information on Cecilia. Hey, there we go. Good on you, Johan. Doing your job, it seems. She confided in him about the terror attacks that had been committed against members of her ministry and about the text messages that she had been receiving. She also called him when a package arrived at her front door containing a piece of meat and a letter that read, "Sorry, this is all the doggies left you. Here's a piece of your precious Reggie." That is some f***ed up shit. And how is it at this point that you're not going to prison immediately? And that I know there's we said there were 11 murders. There's been 3 so far, so that leaves us with 8 more murders. How have you not been arrested and jailed without bail and then convicted and hopefully, I don't know what South Africa, I feel like South Africa, it could be one of those countries that has the death penalty, right? It could be. I feel like it could be. Hey Siri, does South Africa have the death penalty? I can hear multiple Siris going off. None of them have been helpful in telling me whether South Africa has the death penalty. The police obtained a search warrant to search the properties that belonged to Ria, Cecilia, and Marinda. The ingredients for petrol bombs, pipe bombs, and various weapons, knives, and electronics were confiscated, along with photos of the members of Electus per Deus, where they were dressed up as vampires, but none of the weapons found could be linked to any of the murders. How about let's just arrest them and keep them in jail for as long as we can on weapons offences, maybe? That seems reasonable. Detective Van Wijk concluded that the older members of Electus per Deus could all be suspects in the murders of Natasha, Joy, and Reg, and after talking to Michaela's parents, their focus turned to Michaela and her husband, Zach Valentine. I wonder why their attention focused that way. Probably because they're horrible axe murderers. Michaela had been spiraling emotionally, and she'd called her mother soon after Reg's death and asked whether she could help her find a lawyer. She confided in her mother that she wanted to leave Electus per Deus. Zach, well, you're definitely going to be able to leave when you go to prison. Zach told Marinda that Michaela was becoming a liability, and when she told Cecilia about it, the group's focus turned to her. Detective Van Wijk had just applied for a search warrant for the Valentines, right?
To be your Valentine.
Home. Pronunciation-wise, I'm wondering. When a murder was reported at a familiar address, and his heart sank. On the 4th of October 2012, Zach got up and weighed his wife a cup of coffee before leaving for work. He watched as she drank it, kissed her goodbye, and then left the house. He met with Marinda and handed her a set of keys to the house. Marinda and Marcel then headed to the home that Michaela shared with her husband, entered through the garage, and then headed straight for the main bedroom. Well, this is definitely another way to leave the cult. By being murdered by it. Holy and then you got to be I feel like with cults, don't murder your own if you're in a cult, because the whole culty thing is we're all together in this, no? Isn't that like one of the big draws? Although I guess if you do murder one of them, then it sends a message. Oh my god, cults are so scary. There's specific laws against that shit, right? It's also because people be like, no, it's not a cult, it's a religion. So, what's that? There's another great quote that I love. Religion is just a cult with political power. It's dark. Cults are crazy. But so is a lot of religion. Am I right? Since she had been drugged, with the coffee, oh my, Michaela was still in bed and Miranda walked over to her, lifted a hammer and repeatedly hit Michaela in the forehead to keep her from waking up before she started stabbing her repeatedly with a knife. Once again, the 14-year-old Marcel had to watch as her mother killed a person. Oh, sorry, I got it the wrong way round. I thought Michaela was the one with the daughter, but it's actually, everyone's got familiar names. Marcel, Miranda. Why? Marcella, Marcel, Michaela. What's going on? Only this time it was by someone she knew and loved. Michaela had been like an older sister to Marcel, had taught her to cook and to bake, and they'd even had a few sleepovers. So when Marinda turned to her daughter and ordered her to stab Michaela in order to prove her loyalty to the group, Marcel couldn't handle stabbing Michaela more than once, claiming that the knife she'd been given wasn't sharp enough. The murder of Michaela Valentine only cemented Marcel's belief that if she ever turned her back on Electus per Deus or tried to tell anyone about what she'd witnessed, she would be murdered as well. Yeah, you can't be Look, that's another lesson, isn't it? You can't be half in and half out with a cult. You can be in and in and in, and in your mind be like, okay, I'm totally out. It's changing. You're like, I'm 10% out, 20% out. Don't tell anyone until you're 100% out. And those people you should tell are the police when you're far away from them and maybe have some sort of witness protection going on. Murder for a good cause. After Michaela's death, the investigation into what the media had dubbed the satanic murders had run cold. No new information was brought forward, none of the murder weapons had been found, and the police could not get solid enough evidence in order to arrest any members of Electus per Deus. Not only that, but the order came to remove Detective Van Wake from the case, and he still hasn't been told why. Rhea and a few members of Overcomers Through Christ had gone into hiding after an attempt on Rhea's son's life had been made, and she was now out of Cecilia's reach. Years passed. Okay. And by November 2015, Cecilia was running out of money. She'd spent the money the members of Electus per Deus were giving her on bribes, burner phones, ammunition, weapons, and luxury items such as alcohol, expensive clothing, quad bikes, lavish parties, and drugs. Quad bikes, okay. Like, normally you see all of these things that like someone's conning people out of money, and all those stuff fits, like lavish parties, drugs, expensive clothes, booze, and quad bikes, the staple of the wealthy. Quad bikes to me are more what like people just ride around in forests. It's not like, I don't know, like wealthy people golf. The money Zach had received from Michaela's life insurance had also run out since most of it had already been handed over to Cecilia. He started his own financial services company, but was now struggling to make the same amount of money that had been used to, and he could no longer support Cecilia's lavish lifestyle either. Cecilia needed a new source of income. Electus per Deus had befriended a drug addict called John Barnard, and they pulled him into their group, even though he wasn't officially a member of Electus per Deus. He was easily manipulated and didn't take a lot of convincing when Cecilia proposed that they kill someone in order to get their hands on more money. John even had a possible target in mind already, his employers, Peter and Joan Meyer. The Meyers owned a successful printing business that they'd built from the ground up, and the rumors at work were that they kept tons of cash in their 15 million rand home in Nordhevehull, one of Krugersdorp's more wealthy suburbs. The Meyers had recently purchased a large piece of property on the KwaZulu-Natal coast that they were planning on converting into a water park, and were reportedly struggling with the bureaucratic tape surrounding a venture like that. Marinda and Zach contacted the Meyers, posing as government officials, and arranged to meet them at their house on the 27th of November 2015 in order to discuss their plans for the water park. Peter Meyer was wary of meeting them alone and asked one of his friends to sit in on the meeting. If you don't believe they're government officials, why don't you just get some proof of that before? Because you're not going to be wary if you're just going to meet random government officials. You must be wary about them not really being government officials. So just be like, email me from your official. My bank phoned me the other day and were like, hi, this is your bank. Name of bank, not like just, they didn't say this is your bank. And they were like, can you tell us your birth date and some other like security question that they had for me? And they were surprised when I told them no. It's like, how do I know you're calling from my bank? You're always emailing me saying not to give personal information over the phone to people posing as the bank. And they're like surprised when I'm like, no, give me a number and I'll check it online and then I'll call you back. And they're like, well, I'm leaving the office in 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, well, what is this about? And they're like, we can't tell you. And I'm like, well, okay, then this conversation's over. But I'm like, bank, you can't be upset for me when I do the thing that you're always telling me to fucking do. And it didn't feel like some scam, like, because it was 10 to 5. And I'm like, well, they probably are leaving the office in 10 minutes, aren't they? But still, I said, just email me. And they emailed me. And it was boring and not important. Not that I ever get interesting emails from my bank. I don't expect interesting emails from my bank. An interesting email from my bank is probably interesting in a bad way. They emailed me the other day being like, hi, so your fixed mortgage rate that you fixed at 2.2% for 5 years is, well, those 5 years are up in a few months. And now it's 6%. And I'm like, oh, brilliant. That's interesting and terrible. Unfortunately, his friend notified him that he was running late, and Peter and Joan resolved to meet with Marinda and Zach alone. Uh-oh. Once they were inside the house, they used a gun to overpower the couple and tie them up with cable ties. I'm guessing this is written in a weird way where it's not clear who did what, but I'm guessing it's the bad guys. Search of the house didn't reveal the tons of cash that John had promised them, and after beating the couple a few times, Zach finally believed the couple when they told them that they wouldn't be so stupid as to keep cash in the house, since they knew that it would make them the target of armed robberies.
Stupid chunky.
Yeah, also just keeping too much cash is just about, I keep like a bit of cash for emergencies, but it's definitely not interesting enough for like an armed robbery. Like the risk reward of robbing me at my house is just way too low. There's just not enough money there. And it's like, what are you going to steal? Like there's so little stuff to steal these days. It's like, yeah, I got a TV. I got a really nice dining room table, which I really like. That was quite expensive, but you can't steal that. It's a dining room table. It weighs like, it literally weighs like 500 kilograms. It's epic. But you can't steal that. It weighs half a ton. I'm trying to think if I have any other expensive shit in my house, like computers, but you can't steal a computer because it's encrypted and it's useless. There's nothing. I've got nothing. Don't rob me. Zach then stabbed the couple to death in his trademark frenzy, and he and Marinda took the couple's cell phones, the cable ties they'd used to tie them up, and the remote to the gate before fleeing the house. They dumped the knife and the cable ties a few blocks from the Myers house and then headed back to Cecilia's flat to report their failure. Wait, are you going there with those cell phones? Did they take the couple's cell phones? Are you mental? What is wrong with you? You're taking the cell phones. You're driving. Like, even just driving around with them and ditching them is insane. Because the police will track where those cell phones went. They will look at on the, like, cameras on the road, and they'll just tie it together and they'll eventually find your car. But you're actually going to Cecilia's house? You're going to hang out for a while with those cell phones? What are you doing? Did you smoke crack before doing this crime? Because that's insane. The Myers son and his girlfriend found his parents lying in pools of blood on their living room floor and called the police. The family hired a private detective who managed to obtain copies of the security tapes from the CCTV cameras that line almost every street corner in Nord Huvel and managed to identify the cars that passed in the area on the night the Myers were murdered before handing it over to the police. This is also another thing. Like, I get that there's advantages of committing crimes against rich people, but they're also rich. And it's like the police might be used to this, but if they just keep paying private detectives to do shit, it's like they're just going to... It's his parents. He's going to be like, how much money do you have? Lots of money. Lots of money. You know what I'm going to do with that money? Use it to track down my parents' killers, like some sort of Batman shit. And I'm like, cool. The police were able to determine that one of these vehicles belonged to Zach Valentine. The police called him in for questioning, and Zach admitted that he'd been in the area at the time. He told the police that both Marinda and Marcel had been in the car with him. Since the police were aware that the Myers had a meeting scheduled with a couple on the night they were murdered, both Zach and Marinda admitted to having visited the Myers' house and meeting with them, but claimed that another couple had arrived at the Myers' house soon after, interrupting their meeting and resulting in them leaving the property. You couldn't have thought of a better excuse. You know you're going to the police station to answer their questions, and this is what you come up with. Brilliant work. Of course, this unlikely story only placed them on top of the suspect list, and once again, they were told to report to the police in order to undergo a polygraph test. Zach told Cecilia that he wasn't willing to submit himself to a polygraph test, so the group came up with another plan that would not only keep Zach from having to be questioned by the police, but would supply them with 3.5 million rand as well. That's a lot of rand. Wasn't the house like 1 million rands? Oh no, sorry, it's 15 million rands. So it's still a lot of money. I wish I knew. Hey Siri, what's 3.5 million South African rand in US dollars? It's $221,000. So it's a lot. Simply put, Zach had to die, but in order for them to claim his life insurance, they would need a body to pass off as his. On the 16th of December 2015, 2 days before Zach had to report to the police station, he and Marinda's son, the now 20-year-old Leroy, approached a local street vendor and recovering addict, Jared Jackson, and invited him on a fishing trip. Electus Deus had recently befriended Jared and his pregnant fiancée and would often buy out all stock in order to enable the couple to pay for their stay in a local homeless shelter. Oh, he's a street vendor. I must have missed that. I'm like, what's his stock? What are you talking about buying out his stock? Is he some sort of financial trader? And it's like, no, just like stock of his street food. So different levels of money here. Jared agreed and got into Zach's silver Mercedes, sitting in the front seat next to Zach with LaRue behind him. LaRue handed a spiked drink over to Jared, and as soon as he drank it, he became lethargic and unresponsive. LaRue reached over the head rest with a nylon rope and strangled Jared. They drove almost 200 kilometers towards a small farming community called Petra Stain, and stopped Zach's car on the side of the road a few kilometers outside of town. There, Marinda and John joined them together and they moved Jared's body into the passenger seat. They then pushed the Mercedes off the road until it hit a fence, poured paraffin over the car, and lit it on fire. The four of them then got into Marinda's car, drove towards Petrostain for 5 minutes, and then turned around and headed back towards Krugersdorp, passing the burning car. They actually, in terms of crimes that they've committed so far, some have been terrible, some have been rather well executed. This one I'd say is quite well done. We've discussed it previously. It's always a good idea. Don't like hide the car, don't leave the car anywhere, always set it on fire. I still feel though they're strangling them, and that's going to leave some marks that on the bones, and the police are going to look at those bones that might be left over after the fire and realize that they were strangled, so there's going to be murder, and that's different to like a car catching on fire. Also, they poured paraffin over the car, which is going to be a different sort of car fire, as if the car just caught on fire, and if there's a body inside, it's going to clearly look like murder. So it's not brilliantly executed, but it's certainly a lot better fucking executed than taking the murder people's cell phones to your house. That's really stupid. The police officers in Petrostain traced the burnt-out wreck to Zach Valentine, and Marinda showed up in Petrostain posing as Zach's older sister. She identified the body as belonging to Zach. They're not going to ask any ID or anything? Jesus! I pressured the doctor that had performed the autopsy on Jared's remains into signing Zach's death certificate before heading back to Krugersdorp. What sort of doctor can be pressured by someone coming to identify the body? Or is they threatening him with death? It's just going to be like, f*** off. They're not part of some gang. I mean, they kind of are part of a gang, but not like a scary gang. I mean, it's scary. Look, they're murdering people. I don't want to say it's not scary, but it's not like organized crime. It's not like some mafia guy. Because then if I was the doctor and some mafia guy was like, we need you to sign this or we're going to murder you and your family, I'd be like, okay. Okay. Oh my God, I'd so be in the pocket of mafia if I had any position of influence. Because I'd be like, no, okay, just don't murder anyone I know. I'm way too much of a coward to put up a fight. And it's like, yeah, I know there could be consequences. I could lose my job and but you know what's better? Not having my family murdered by the mob. Jesus. I'd accept their money. They'd be like, hey, Simon. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, that's not a mafia. Is that how mafia people spell? I don't know. I'd be like, hey. And they'd be like, we need you to do this thing. I'm trying to do Italian. That's it's like, we need you to do this thing for us. Just a small little thing. And I'll be like, okay. And they'll be like, we didn't even talk about payments. And I'll be like, I know, because I know what happens next. You offer to pay me, I say no, and then you offer to kill my family, and I say yes. So I'll just say yes right at the top and get some money and save everybody the trouble. Oh my God. I'm never gonna take up any position of power because that.
That I cannot do.
On the 18th of December, LaRue called the insurance agency that had Zach's life insurance policy and started the process of claiming it on behalf of Celia, who was listed as his own beneficiary. That doesn't sound suspicious at all, does it? Shane Chatskelovitz. Your guess. The pronunciation guide from Emma here is, your guess is as good as mine. Chatskelovitz is the life insurance forensic specialist that was assigned to verify the early death claim that Cecilia and LaRue had made against Zach's life insurance. Zach's life insurance premiums had been in arrears and had been settled in cash a week before he was reported as having passed away, marking it as suspicious. Shocking. The more Shane read about Zach's supposed death, the more suspicious he became regarding the circumstances of the death. Shane became even more suspicious when he found out that Zach's wife, Michaela, had been murdered only a few years earlier. Shane then advised that the insurance policy should not be paid out. Good on you, Shane. You've done work that the police have yet to manage. Cecilia would call the insurance agency every day to inquire after their claim, and eventually Shane agreed to meet with her. On the 4th of May 2016. What are you doing? Their entire meeting was recorded as per company policy, and Shane made note of Cecilia's anxious and almost defensive posture. She spends the entire interview sitting on the edge of her seat, her arms crossed, and she would ramble on whenever he asked her a question relating to Zach's accident. In the background, LaRue could be seen pacing in the hallway, and when asked about Cecilia's relationship with Zach, Cecilia claimed that she'd been Zach's beneficiary even before he'd been married to his wife, Michaela, who'd passed away. Shane questioned Cecilia regarding the details surrounding Michaela's death, informing her that he knew that Michaela had been murdered, and Cecilia fabricated a bunch of information surrounding the supposed home invasion and made Shane even more suspicious of her motivation in claiming Zach's life insurance policy. How could she be more suspicious? This is all crazy. Like, Shane, mate, you gotta go to the police and be like, what's up? I've discovered something. Cecilia wasn't playing the part of a grieving lifelong friend and had no idea where Zach's house was located. Having never visited, she also made sure to explain the inconvenience Zach's death had caused her and complained that her health already wasn't what it should be, referring to her supposed dependency on an oxygen tank. Her woe is me routine was meant to portray her as weak and incapable of harming Zach in any way, but Shane saw right through Cecilia's act. After meeting with Cecilia and Leroux, Shane asked that a blood type test should be done on the remains that had been identified as Zach. When the results didn't match with what they had on file for Zach, Shane approached the police to let them know that he believed Zach Valentine was still alive. And also maybe mention the fact that someone else has definitely been murdered, my dudes. Like, what's up? Someone dying in a fiery crash is like, this is so suspicious. And it just gets more suspicious. And please, let's close the noose on these The appointment murders. The group had made a big mistake in faking Zach's death. Not only was more and more evidence building up against the group as a whole, but Zach had been Cecilia's main source of income, and now he was unable to line his pockets since a dead man couldn't be employed. Now it fell to Marinda to not only support her own kids, but to support both Cecilia and Zach as well. Zach had used an altered ID that used to belong to a roommate of his to rent a furnished room, but the cost of keeping a roof over his head turned out to be more than Marinda could afford on a teacher's salary. And now Zach was threatening to go to the police. Yeah, Zach's kind of screwed because he's been involved in some major crimes, but maybe by turning on his mates and becoming a snitch, which he should absolutely do, he could get a deal of some kind. They needed money urgently, and in January of 2016, they devised a new scheme that would later become known as the appointment murders. They identified professionals who, according to Zach, were almost guaranteed to have ample amounts of money on hand since he either knew them personally, had managed their finances, or had worked with them at one point or another. On January the 27th, 2016, Marinda, John, Leroux, and Marcel visited the home of a private tax practitioner called Glenn McGregor. They had made an appointment with him under the premise that he would assist Marinda with her taxes, and Marinda and her children had knocked on the door while John waited some distance away. Glenn greeted them and invited them inside, and after the door closed behind them, Marinda pulled out a gun and told Glenn that they were there to rob him. According to Marinda's testimony in court, Glenn didn't believe her, going so far as to laugh at her, and Leroux stepped up to Glenn in an effort to subdue him. Glenn then lunged for the younger man, and Marinda shot him twice in the lower back. Well, honestly, he was going to be dead anyway. So yeah, he made the right choice by fighting back, even if he dies anyway. Marinda ordered Marcel and Leroux to tie the injured Glenn up. Together, the three of them searched Glenn's house for cash or bank cards, but weren't able to find any. Marinda then took Glenn's phone and asked him for his bank PIN. Eventually, he provided her with the correct ones, and Marinda was able to access his bank account. Glenn only had 6,000 Rand in his account, and Marinda transferred the money into her own account through an immediate transfer.
What an idiot!
You are an insane person. I can't imagine what possessed you to think that this is a good idea for 6,000 Rands. Hey Siri, how much is 6,000 South African Rand in US dollars? It's $380. What are you doing? And also, yeah, even if this guy's like, well, he's a well-off professional, people don't have that much money in just their everyday walking around bank account. Like, I've got more. It's more than a few $100s, but it's not a lot of money. It's not worth getting. It's not money that, is worth shooting someone over. I can already hear Simon calling her an idiot. Yes. But what, up to this point, gave you the impression that they were master criminals? Well, partially. 1, they've murdered many people and have not been caught. 2, the leader of this cult is very manipulative and probably not unintelligent, I would say. And also, some of the crimes have been relatively well thought out. Not compared to other people. I would think out crimes way better than this. I do all these things and it's like, really? I'm glad I'm not a criminal, because I'd probably get away with it better than most of these guys. Does that sound arrogant? But there are so many idiots committing crimes. I guess because people who like, I don't need to commit crimes because I have, like, enough stuff and money. And I guess, is that because I use my big brain? Nah, I'm always like, it's like there's a fair shake of luck involved in success. Look, I don't know, but I'm always like, these people are not that clever doing these crimes. And I'm like, to wire yourself money from someone you've just shot in the bank's bank account is just insane. Even Marinda herself admitted that it had been a stupid idea, but at the time she didn't know how else to ensure that they would be able to access the money, and they needed it urgently. Glenn was still alive, so LaRue offered to strangle him. Once Glenn stopped breathing, LaRue and Marcel dragged his body into the bathroom, and Marcel opened up the hot water tap. They placed Glenn's body into the bathtub, and once the bathtub had been filled with hot water, they turned off the taps, wiped down any fingerprints that they might have left behind, and left the house. The money they'd managed to get hold of didn't last long. It was like $380, and there were like 4 of you. And was only enough to keep a roof over Zach's head for another 2 months. Zach had incredibly reasonable rent. By the end of 2016, Zach was forced to leave the cheap hotel that had been staying at and was now staying in homeless shelters all over Krugersdorp. Then, in May 2016, the group targeted the 67-year-old Anthony Schofield, an insurance broker that Zach had once worked with when he was still working as a financial advisor. What? How is the police not found this Glenn dude's body and been like, oh, he's murdered, wasn't he? Let's have a look at his bank records. Oh, look, someone got a wire transfer of all of his money on the basically day to exact time that he was murdered. How about we go and arrest them?
We think it's the work of a cult.
Cult!
Sheba and I.
Put that thing at me, fool.
No? Not a brilliant idea there, police? How are these people still free and walking around? What are you doing? Get your together. LaRue called Anthony's office and arranged to meet him at a nearby shopping mall on the 10th of May 2016 at 6 p.m. that evening. Once Anthony notified LaRue that he was on his way, LaRue called him and asked him to meet him at his apartment instead. Anthony agreed, and he drove over to the apartment where the Stein family lived. Isn't it weird that people are just going to random meetings? Like, I don't go to meetings. I can't think of a single meeting I've been to, at least in, like, memory, where I've gone to someone's house. Like, maybe if I was like, if you're buying something used, you'd go to someone's house, but like a professional meeting. People I meet with professionally are like other professionals. They have offices that I will end up Googling so I can go to their offices. And maybe someone would come to my office, but then they're on my turf. So that's not what these guys are doing. It's all very weird. And I'd find it very weird if I had like a meeting with some professional, like 5 of them showed up. You'd be like, hello. I don't have chairs for all of you. You're just the 3 junior people are going to have to stand. And please don't murder me. LaRue greeted Anthony at his car after indicating that he should park in front of their apartment building and led him up to the apartment where Marinda and Marcel were waiting. Once he was inside... Oh, so wait, this guy is going to their house, which... I'm so confused. No, wait, that's what I was saying is weird. That is weird. Once he was inside, Marinda pulled a gun on him, like she'd done with Glenn McGregor, and informed Anthony that this was a robbery. They tied him to a chair, confiscated his wallet and card, and then demanded that he should give them his PIN if he wanted to live. After they'd tortured him, resulting in blood pooling on the carpet beneath him, Anthony finally revealed his PIN to them. Marcel was then sent to the nearest ATM and was ordered to call Marinda and confirm that the PIN Anthony had provided them with was actually the correct one. Marcel managed to withdraw an amount of 16,000 rand from his account, so... what was it, 6,000 before was 300, so roughly $1,000 American. And when she called her mother to confirm that she had the cash in hand, LaRue strangled him. They covered his body in refuse bags, placed him in a dustbin, and then they wheeled it down to the parking area and placed him in the trunk of his car. They then drove his car a few blocks away and abandoned it in front of a primary school where it was later found by the neighborhood watch. The next day, LaRue would attempt another withdrawal from Anthony's account, but his cards had already been blocked. How? Why? Who blocked them? On the 26th of May, another insurance broker, 29-year-old Kevin McAlpine, had an appointment with Marinda, and again he was lured to their apartment. This time, they only managed to withdraw 1,300 rand from his account. That's going to be like $20. Hey Siri, how much is 1,300 South African rand in US dollars? $82. That sucks. I mean, for them. And just like Anthony Schofield, Kevin was strangled and would later be found in the trunk of his car, his body wrapped in refuse bags for $80. Panic began to spread throughout Krugersdorp once Kevin's body was found. Rumors ran amok regarding a possible serial killer that was targeting insurance agents working in Krugersdorp, and a lot of professionals who would meet with their clients outside of an office started to take measures in order to keep themselves safe. Like, how about, I've got an office, come to me. Or, let's do this over the telephone. The number of people who whatever, this is true, like, still though. When was this? Like 5 years ago? That's not that long ago, 5-6 years ago. But I still feel like now, it's like, how about we just do an email? How about we don't have a meeting at all? Then if you don't want to do an email, how about we have a phone call? And if you really don't want to do a phone call, how about we do a meeting? And I just go to no meetings. Unless I have to be there to sign something and a power of attorney won't cover it, where I'll give someone else like the ability to just go sign shit for me. There's no way I'm going to meetings. Like, I'll go to meetings to sign like mortgages and stuff like that. Otherwise, I'm not going. Meetings. It's a huge waste of time. One of these professionals was 52-year-old estate agent Hanley Lartigan, and on the 30th of May, just 4 days after Kevin McAlpine had been murdered, Hanley was scheduled to meet Marinda at her apartment building that was located across the street from Krugersdorp Private Hospital. Unlike the other victims, Hanley parked in full view of the CCTV cameras and notified her husband when she'd arrived at the hospital just after 6 p.m. She waited for almost 10 minutes before Marinda met her at her vehicle in the hospital parking lot. Marinda took Hanley up to their apartment, and just like she'd done with Anthony Schofield and Kevin McAlpine, threatened Hanley with a gun and demanded that she give them her PIN codes. Although now she's going to be like, well, no, you're going to murder me. So, fighting back time. And in the middle of the crisis, Hanley became my hero. Realizing that these were the people who were responsible for murdering both Anthony and Kevin, Hanley did what she could to buy herself more time, aware of the fact that if she didn't check in with her husband by 7 p.m. as discussed, he would start looking for her. She told Marinda that she never kept large amounts of money on her bank cards and that she would have to make a transfer first. They handed Hanley her cell phone, and Hanley was able to access her bank accounts, transferring money from a savings account that she and her husband never used. As soon as the transaction was finalized, Hanley's husband received a message that 3,000 rands had been withdrawn from their savings account, and he immediately knew that she was in danger. Marcel headed to the nearest ATM to withdraw the money, but the PIN Hanley provided was wrong, buying Hanley more time while her husband and son launched a search for her. Police, come on. After several failed attempts to access a bank account and with warning messages flooding Hanley's husband's phone, Marinda lost patience with Hanley and assaulted her. Hanley eventually provided them with the correct PIN for her bank cards, not knowing that her son was in the parking lot below, inspecting her car and trying to determine where she'd gone. Once Marcel informed her mother that she'd managed to withdraw the money, LaRue strangled Hanley as well. Come on. That's disappointing. However, by this time, the hospital parking lot was swarming with people, and Marcel told her mother that the police had cordoned off a section of the street looking for any sign of where Hanley had gone. Now they had a body on their hands and no means of disposing of it. The members of Electus per Deus stood and watched as Hanley's son gave the police permission to break one of the car windows, giving them access to the vehicle. I'd just be like, all yours, chaps. They determined that Hanley's body hadn't been placed in the back of the car, and CCTV footage from the hospital parking lot only showed that she'd left the parking lot with a dark-haired woman. They all convened in Cecilia's bedroom, and Cecilia ordered LaRue to dump Hanley's body as soon as the police left the scene. Are the police going to leave the scene for some time? I mean, they know what's up. By 11 p.m, the police decided that nothing could be done. Oh, there we go. And since they had no leads, they left the scene, taking Hanley's car with them. LaRue and John then loaded Hanley's body into the trunk of Marinda's car. Marinda's car. Sorry, I thought it was the victim's car for a second, which would be insane. And dumped her in an empty field outside of town, where the car was found by school children the next day. Following Hanley's death, the residents of Krugersdorp initiated an unofficial curfew of 6 p.m, trying to keep their loved ones safe from the vicious serial killer that was stalking their streets. The beginning of the end. By now, Simon must be going out of his mind, constantly berating the police for not doing their jobs. How did you know, Emma? As in many of the cases that we feature on Casual Criminalist, I can completely agree with Simon that so far, the police had failed every single person that had fallen victim to Electus per Deus. From the very first murder, multiple people had pointed a finger at Cecilia Stain and her followers, but so far, nothing had been done to bring them to justice, and they had left a f***ing trail of evidence. The botched murders, the cell phones to the house, the transferring of the money of someone who has just been murdered to their own bank accounts. It's insanity.
I can feel your anger.
I feel like sometimes I could be a better detective just now. If someone was just like, come be a detective, I'd be like, yeah, probably could do that. It's not if someone was like, yeah, come be a surgeon. I'd be like, honestly, don't know where to start. Come be a detective. I'd be like, yeah, I could figure this out. Could do this. Probably. I guess the problem is you go there and then they're like, oh, you have a massive amount of work to do and you can't spend a lot of time on each case. And that would be like, well, yeah, I guess I just wouldn't be very good like anyone else because you're just overworked and underpaid and that kind of sucks. But still, it's annoying, isn't it? I'm sure surgeons are underworked, overworked. Probably not underpaid though, to be honest. Especially like the amount doctors make in America is crazy. Like surgeons make hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just mad. It's great. Probably important to pay people who do surgery a lot of money. But not to worry, this is the part where the A-team is called in to assist with the investigation into the deaths of Anthony, Kevin and Hanley. A task force known as the War Room arrived in Krugersdorp and took over the investigation. Members of the War Room came from different disciplines within the police, and it was led by Brigadier Victor, the provincial head of the Crime Intelligence Unit within the South African Police Force. Brigadier sounds important. It sounds like this dude's gonna be like, let's get this done! Let's bash some skulls in. They spent hours poring over the case files relating to each murder, and that is how Brigadier Victor became aware of Captain Ben Boyson, an experienced and well-respected investigating officer within the South African police force. It built a reputation for being relentless when it came to the cases that he was investigating, and Captain Boyson was chosen to take the lead on the investigation. The War Room had obtained copies of the CCTV footage from the ATMs where the victims' cards had been used and sent out photos of the two teenagers who'd withdrawn the cash from the victims' bank accounts, asking the public for help in identifying them. Soon an informant came forward and identified the teenagers who'd withdrawn the cash as 20-year-old LaRue and the 18-year-old Marcel Stain. Both teenagers were brought in for questioning and their photographs were taken. Facial image analysis reports were run against photos taken by the police, and it was compared to the CCTV footage obtained from the ATMs. The reports confirmed that it was indeed LaRue and Marcel in those images. Finally, the police had concrete evidence that linked the two murders of Electus per Deus to the appointment murders, and both LaRue and Marcel were arrested barely 3 weeks into the investigation, appearing in court on the 27th of June 2016 after reportedly spending the weekend behind bars. During her interrogation, Marcel claimed that LaRue had obtained the bank cards from a group of Nigerians and that she suspected that they had murdered Anthony, Kevin and Hanley. Mate, if you think there's enough money in there, you're an idiot. It's like, yeah, no, I bought these from a group of criminals who were murdering people for bank cards. So if you're getting $80 off one of these bank cards, how much do you think those Nigerians were actually selling it to them for? This is, again, better excuses, guys. And above that, lawyers. Lawyers. Get some lawyers. Where are the lawyers? Get lawyers. Come on. However, LaRue made a full confession stating that he'd strangled each one of the victims, but claimed that he'd worked alone, taking responsibility for everything. Captain Boyson saw through LaRue's confession and turned all of his attention on finding out who LaRue was protecting. The War Room looked into cases that were similar to the appointment murders and came across the case of the Myers murder. This was the couple who'd been murdered inside their Nordhul home back in November of 2015. The detective on the case noted that Marinda had made an appointment to meet with the Myers on the night they were murdered, and the War Room jumped on this detail. Not only did it match the modus operandi used in the appointment murders, but it linked Marinda and her two children and gave the War Room another suspect to focus on. In a surprising twist of events, one of Captain Boyson's informants gave him a call and told him that he should obtain a warrant for Marinda Stain's classroom. She was a well-liked and respected teacher at one of the local high schools, and the principal was reluctant to give police access to Marinda's classroom. Initially, guess what? You didn't have to give permission when you get a search warrant. You're just going in there. It's like, no, I don't need permission. We got this thing signed by a judge. We're coming in. F off. Let's get this bastard. Initially, her classroom didn't turn up any obvious evidence, but it contained 2 ovens. Since Marinda didn't teach hospitality studies, this was unusual, so Detective Boyson opened the ovens and came across bags filled with ammunition. Why are there ovens in her room? And why is she using that to hide ammunition? It's a bad idea if someone decides to turn on those ovens. When the principal was confronted with this evidence of Miranda's possible involvement in the appointment murders, he promised the police full cooperation. His wife, who was also a teacher at the school, approached Captain Boyson and informed him that Miranda had recently changed her will. The school held a copy of it in trust for her, and it was turned over to the police. The will had been drawn up soon after Leroux and Marcel had been arrested, and in it Miranda disowned her children, making Cecilia Stain her only beneficiary in the case of her death. If you're in a cult and someone's making you change your will to benefit the cult, be very suspicious about them potentially knocking you off, especially if they've been knocking off other people for $80, yes? Finally, Captain Boyson had the leverage he could use against Leroux. When Leroux was confronted with the proof of his mother's betrayal, Leroux broke down, and it wasn't long before he turned against Electus per Deus as a whole and began to sing like a canary. Yeah, you gotta be the guy who sings. You gotta, like, in a situation like this, it's like, get a deal. You're probably going to prison forever, but at least they're not gonna stick a needle in your arm. The crux in the case. Leroux turned state witness in the case against Electus per Deus, and over a period of a few days, he shocked Captain Boyson by not only revealing his mother's role in the appointment murders, but he linked Electus per Deus to every one of the 11 murders that they committed since July 2012, including their attempt at faking Zach's death. But what had happened to Zach, you might ask? Well, Deus, that's a funny story. Back in May 2016, Shane Chatzkalowitz, the life insurance specialist that had been tasked with verifying the claim against Zach's life insurance, had contacted the police and informed them of his suspicion that Zach was still alive. Notices went out to all police officers and informants working in and around Krugersdorp to keep an eye out for him, and in an ironic twist of fate, a woman who regularly volunteered with her Bible study group at a homeless outreach program recognized Zach's photograph when her boyfriend, a police officer, brought it home from work one weekend. Dude, what are you doing?
Being an asshole.
Zach, what are you up to? If they faked your death, you have to leave town, mate. I don't know how big this Krugersdorp place is, but even if you live, I live in a city with like 1-point-something million people. And if I'd faked my death, you gotta leave, dude. You can't stay there. There's people who know you. Even the barista at Starbucks will be like, hey, aren't you the guy didn't you get murdered? You gotta leave town. You probably should leave the country, to be honest. She identified the man in the photo as Michael de Villiers and told her boyfriend that she'd met him at one of the outreach programs that a church hosted once a month. I suppose you could change your name, but you gotta change your face, right? I guess, like, grow a beard, shave your head, get a pair of glasses, and you'll look really different. I look at old videos of myself and it's like, oh boy, I look different. Members of the homeless community would be invited to go camping with volunteers from the church for an entire weekend. Do homeless people really want to go camping? Is that what you want to do? If I was homeless and they're like, do you want to go camping? It's like, mate, all I do is camp. Can we not go to a hotel? Come on. I need someone with a shower. Come on. And Zach had drawn her attention immediately because he didn't fit in with the rest of the crowd. So when the next outreach was held, she took a series of photos of a shirtless Zach and sent it off to her boyfriend, enabling them to confirm that the tattoos on his back did indeed identify him as Zach Valentine. And so, on the last day of the outreach, a police convoy rocked up at the campgrounds and Zach was finally arrested on suspicion of fraud, just 3 days after the arrest of Leroux and Marcel. He's probably like, oh, phew, only fraud. And then it's like, oh no, it's about to get worse. Someone's rolled over. Captain Boyson got hold of the case file relating to Zach's disappearance, and he was able to obtain an arrest warrant for Cecilia Stain and Miranda Stain under the suspicion of intent to commit fraud, since both of them were linked to the fraudulent claim in one way or another. Bros, what? There's a murder. There was a dead body in the car. You'd be like, we're arresting you for fraud. Wait, you mean the fraud where we killed the guy, put him in the car, and pretended that he was me? Suspicion of murder, my guys, come on. As part of his confession, Leroux had also pointed a finger at John Barnard, and when he was brought in for questioning and was confronted with Leroux's testimony, he didn't hesitate to provide Captain Boyson with a full confession. His story matched with Leroux's, and now Captain Boyson had 2 witnesses who were willing to turn state's evidence in return for a reduced sentence. Finally, all remaining members of Electus per Deus were in police custody, and Captain Boyson would spend the next 2 months building a solid case against them. Captain Boyson, you legend. You wrapped this up so fast. It's just a shame they didn't bring your legendary arse in a little bit earlier. 60 Days in Hell. The details surrounding the rest of the investigation is muddled and complex, and I have just spent 2 hours trying to make sense of it all. Instead, I'm going to skip the whole investigation itself since we already know exactly what happens, and I'm going to summarize the events that unfolded in court over a span of 60 days. Good. Sometimes I read that, I'm like, oh, come on, you could have typed it. This would have been good. And then I'm also like, if Emma's big brain can't handle it, then my small brain probably can't. So, and then also it's just easier to listen to when it's all a bit more simple, isn't it? I like that. Sometimes I'll have a new writer and they'll deliver me something and I'm like, this is really good and well researched, but I'm struggling to follow it. And when I'm struggling to follow it, I know that viewers are going to struggle to follow it. So it's always like, we need, like, my polite way of putting it, but dumbing it down a little, is like, can you lower the reading level, please? Because I'm like, I'm trying to read it and I don't want to, it's not like I'm reading some textbook and I really want to learn about this. I want to be entertained. And all of my content, I'm always like, yes, we're here to tell people about stuff, but really entertainment. Like, it's YouTube. People aren't coming there to like learn. They're coming there to be entertained and learn something as well when you generally tune into my stuff. I do a lot of educational content on YouTube if you just happen to be randomly listening to this as a podcast, which would be weird, but cool. That's my other stuff. And yeah, let's carry on. LaRue Stain and John Barnard both testified on behalf of the state, detailing every single crime that Electus per Deus had committed, as well as the motivations behind it. In a surprise twist, Miranda Stain's lawyer approached the state prosecutor and claimed that his client also wanted to plead guilty. When asked why she decided to confess to her role in the murders, Miranda said, "I got a verse from God saying, 'Confess and you will be forgiven.' I could sit here through a whole trial and pretend that I never did any of these crimes and hope to get free from it, but that is not what God wants me to do." Throughout the 3 days that she provided testimony in court, she never implicated either Marcel or Cecilia in any of the murders, claiming that they'd been unaware of her involvement up until she was arrested. You can watch her full testimony on YouTube, and whenever she's asked to explain how a specific crime was committed, she'd pause for a moment, as if thinking of how to explain away her daughter's involvement in the crimes. Whenever she would be confronted with LaRue's version of events, she would scoff and call him a liar, claiming that he was jealous of his sister. At the end of the first hearings in 2018, the 22-year-old LaRue was found guilty of 7 murders and was sentenced to 35 years in prison, with 10 being suspended as part of his plea deal. So he could realistically be out of prison by the time he's 47 for being a part of 7 murders, which I am all for, like, potential forgiveness, but 7 murders? 7 people dead? John Barnard received 20 years in prison for his role in the deaths of Peter and Joan Meyer, Glenn McGregor, and Jared Johnson. Miranda Stain received 11 life sentences in total that are to be served concurrently, as well as a whopping 115 additional years in prison for related charges. So she probably wasn't very, like, she's like, oh good, they're being served concurrently. That'll make a huge difference when I'm 135. Good. Marcel, Zach, and Cecilia appeared in court in 2018 after spending 2 years in prison. Only Zach and Cecilia were questioned in court, since Marcel could only be tied to the appointment murders, and they both denied involvement in those murders. The state prosecutor, Advocate Roberts, had decided to approach the case against the remaining members of Electus per Deus as a racketeering case, treating Electus per Deus as a criminal organization instead of a group of serial killers. Yeah, they are a gang. I would classify them as a gang, if that's a criminal organization, I suppose. Since Cecilia was identified as the kingpin of the organization, they didn't have to prove that she was directly involved in any of the murders. Instead, they only had to prove that she benefited from it. Her bank statements were riddled with deposits from the other members of Electus per Deus, and since she had never been employed for a day in her life, she wasn't able to explain how she'd been able to live the lavish lifestyle that she had enjoyed, if only for a short period. If you were to watch her entire testimony on YouTube and take a shot every time she responded with "I don't know" or "I can't remember" to a question in her fake American accent, you would be wasted within the first hour. And when the trial had run its course, something happened that neither the prosecutor, the defense, the court, or the members of Electus per Deus had seen coming. Marcel took the stand. Too little, too late. Over the course of 2 days, 21-year-old Marcel sat in the witness stand and confessed to everything. In a calm, clear voice, she provided the court with detailed testimony regarding not only her role in the murders, but also that of Cecilia and Zach. In essence, she completely negated her mother's efforts to conceal Marcel's role in Electus per Deus and only added to Leroux's already detailed testimony. In the videos I've watched, you can see the anger and frustration on Zach and Cecilia's faces as Marcel told her piece. Throughout the entire investigation, Marcel had outright refused to cooperate with the police, and now she was dropping one bombshell after another. Regarding Miranda's testimony, Marcel explained that my mother had the idea that if she said we were not involved, that it would contribute to getting us off. But I really felt that Cecilia manipulated her to get her to that point. When asked why she had chosen to come forward now, Marcel explained that even though I didn't agree with what we had done and I felt it was wrong, I kept on trying to convince myself that it must be right because Cecilia says it is. And if she portrays herself to be, then she's right, and I'm listening to the devil when I'm doubting her. So when I got to the point that I realized that she isn't who she says she was, then I realized that what we had done was wrong, and there's no excuse for it. And I felt I had to speak the truth and expose her so that she'll never be able to do that to anyone again, to use and abuse people, and to connive as she did toward people's deaths. This is so crazy. This is one of those things where it's like, we were talking earlier about like the responsibility of a manipulated person. And it's like, yes, there is some like redemption, some like you have just been brainwashed, but also you were part of murders. In her closing statement, a clearly emotional Marcel teared up and in a broken voice said, I know that me testifying and telling the truth and admitting to what I had done and how sorry I am doesn't bring them back. And all I can say is I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. After her testimony, Marcel approached Captain Ben Boyson and told him that she couldn't return to the same prison where Cecilia and her mother were kept because they had threatened to kill her for testifying against them. Her legal counsel brought in an urgent application requesting that Marcel should be moved to a different facility. The judge presiding over the hearing, Judge Ellen Francis, accepted her request and recommended that Marcel should be moved to a different facility than the ones that housed Miranda and Cecilia Stain. In his final judgment, Judge Francis explained that, quote, the role of this court is to dispense justice. Satanism, which is not a criminal offense in our country, is not on trial, but the evil deeds that were committed by the accused are heinous, barbaric, and cold-blooded crimes in terms of the laws of our country. This is the worst case that I presided over. Words fail to describe what I'd witnessed for the duration of the trial. There are 11 deceased who were brutally murdered in this matter, and nothing less than the maximum penalty suffices. On the 3rd of June 2019, Zach Valentine was found guilty of all the charges brought against him and was sentenced to 8 life sentences, as well as an additional 93 years for related charges. These long sentences is like just until you die, mate, and you're not getting out. There's no parole. We'll knock 90 years off. You've still got 8 life sentences and 3 additional years. Come on. Crazy. Cecilia Stain was found guilty of all the charges brought against her and received 13 life sentences, as well as an additional 155 years in prison. 13 life sentences is a lot for 11 murders. And despite stepping forward and confessing, the court found in July 2012 14-year-old Marcel could be held legally responsible for her role in the satanic murders. Despite her age, she played an active role in planning the murders and also had the words Electus per Deus tattooed on her body. As a result, Marcel Stain was found guilty on all charges that had been brought against her, and she received 7 life sentences as well as an additional 144 years in prison. Victims of an unholy war. When the murders were taking place, I had just moved to Pretoria and would often travel to Krugersdorp for work. I hope it wasn't as a professional. I remember being aware the bodies had been found in abandoned cars, but even so, the Krugersdorp murders were nothing more than a faint blip on my radar. So once the 4-part documentary on it aired on local streaming service last year, my husband and I binged watched it over the course of 3 days. And as I watched Marcel stand up in court and listen to her testimony, I couldn't help but cry at the fate that had befallen her and Leroux. Imagine growing up believing that monsters were very, very real. Imagine being 8 or 10 years old and witnessing the proof of their existence in the form of a scary, occult-obsessed woman who regularly suffered fits that would result in blood spurting out of her mouth. Was Leroux also young? Was he underage? Sorry, I totally missed that. He must have been. It's been a while since we got an update on his age, but if he is, then I feel the same way that I felt about the 14-year-old. Imagine having to share a house with that woman, or with her constantly reminding you that your favourite teddy was possessed by ghosts who would spy on you on her behalf. Imagine that the person responsible for keeping you safe not only forced you into these situations, but then dragged you along when she murdered someone that you loved. Imagine telling your mother that you don't want to hurt the lady, and her threatening you at gunpoint, telling you that if you didn't cooperate, she would kill you herself. And then imagine growing up with the knowledge that even if you did run away, they would only find you again, drag you back, beat you bloody with a baseball bat, and tell you that no one would believe you anyway, because no one ever did. Marinda Stain was a horrible, sadistic person who enjoyed killing others. She was also a horrible, abusive mother who ruined her children's lives the moment she dragged them into this mess, determined to teach them how to commit murders alongside her. And my heart breaks for the children that Marcel and LaRue had once been, for the lives that they'd lost, and for the lives that they are now forced to live. Dismembered appendices. There are so many tidbits that were left out of this script, but here are a few of the more notable ones. Number 1. A man who is only referred to as Mr. X had come to know Cecilia Stain and her group through a friend and had somehow managed to endear himself to Cecilia. After the satanic murders took place, he was determined to find evidence that would prove that the members of Electus per Deus had been involved in the murders. Cecilia herself had confided in him and confessed that Zack had been the one to commit the murders. Mr. X managed to record a conversation between the members of Electus per Deus when they were discussing the attempted murder of Ria Grunewald's son, and would later go into hiding when he realized that his life was in danger as well. With the help of a friend, they delivered the recording to the police and managed to warn Ria Grunewald that her son was in danger, preventing his murder. Good for you, Mr. X, and also good for you for being anonymous. Number 2. During their investigation into Electus per Deus, Captain Ben Boyson realized that the case files relating to the satanic murders had gone missing. Several members of the Krugersdorp police force were implicated in their disappearance, and it became known that they had somehow befriended Cecilia Stain and other members of Electus per Deus. What? So this is why because there was a bit of weirdness going on with the police. There was that dude taken off the case. Boyson. Sorry. No, Boyson came in later. Was he the guy who came in later? There was some guy who got taken off the case early. The detective was making some progress. And that was a little bit corrupt. I'd say someone's... Goddamn, police, you got to be less corrupt. It's not good. It explained why the investigation into the 2012 murders died an early death. An investigation into the conduct of these police officers is still underway. Good. Bloody hell, it's been 10 years though. No. There was this... 2012 was the earliest times. So there was more. Well, look, it should have just been dropped because it's been a long time, should it? What argument am I trying to make here? Get these guys. Number 3. Cecilia Stain was actually married to a police officer when all of this happened and has 2 children of her own. She said shared the apartment with her family, but no longer shared a bedroom with her husband, and the members of Electus per Deus were ordered to never speak of anything relating to religion in front of him or her children. Once her involvement in the murders became known, he filed for divorce. He was also a suspect in the disappearance of the case files, but all charges against him were dropped when his disdain for his estranged wife became apparent. That's a hell of a twist, isn't it? I'm just realizing how extreme that is. Cecilia, like the main crazy, was married to a police officer this whole time. What are you up to, police? That didn't really hit me. I was just reading this like normal, and then I'm like, wait, what? That's mental. He was also considered to be of too low a rank to have been able to assist Cecilia in concealing her crimes. Number 4. There are at least 2 more cases where Cecilia Stain was a suspect. One of them was the suspicious suicide of a teenage boy that could never be proven to be a homicide. The other involved a 13-year-old teenager called Morne Harmse, who showed up at school in August 2008 wearing a papier-mâché mask and a katana. He killed one of the students and injured 3 others before he was caught. There was also speculation that he was interested in the occult. In both these cases, Cecilia Stain was mentioned as being a mentor to these boys. Good lord. It's like, wait, we didn't have enough horrible shit from her today, and now we're also learning that she was married to a cop who just nothing, and then also mentoring a samurai dude? What the f***? Number 5. Despite her horrible upbringing, Marcel Stain was a top achiever in school, managing to obtain 8 distinctions at the end of her high school career. She had secretly applied to university without her mother's knowledge and had received her acceptance letter into medical school only a few days before Anthony Schofield was murdered. That just makes it even more depressing, doesn't it? She's in prison forever. Number 6. Some of you might have noticed that I never explained Cecilia's past. She would tell everyone, oh yeah, we did have the backgrounds at the beginning, but it never really talked about her. And we always start off talking about the killer, the gang leader or whatever you want to describe her as. I didn't pick up on that, though. Weird. Really paying attention there, Simon, aren't you? She would tell everyone who would listen about the horrors she'd been subjected to growing up, that her mother was also a witch and that she'd been killed trying to protect Cecilia. In reality, she had a normal middle-class childhood and was raised by two normal, kind, down-to-earth people who are still alive to this day. Despite all of this, Cecilia idolized Charles Manson and was expelled from school when she was 15 on suspicion that she was involved in the occult. To quote Simon, "Some people are just born monsters." That's so intense. I mean, it's true, though. There's, people who, I guess it's usually a combination. You've got someone who's a bit prone to being crazy, not crazy, but like a psycho. And then also they have a terrible upbringing, and boom, you've mixed it together and you have a serial killer. Also, some people are just they have a good childhood and everything, and it's just no, they're just born to kill. So, oh my God. I hope none of my kids are born to kill, because I'm working really hard, not to turn them into psychos. So, it'd be a bit bad if it's just no, it just turns out he likes killing. Oh no. Number 7. On a lighter note, one of the reporters who reported on the appointment murders and who would eventually interview Leroux after his arrest fell in love with him during the course of their friendship. Once her relationship with a convicted criminal came to light, she lost her job, her husband, and her family. Despite all of this, they're reported to be blissfully happy until they broke up during lockdown. Wait, isn't he in prison? Apparently the COVID-19 restrictions that were implemented in the facility where Leroux is serving his sentence were too strict, and the couple were unable to see each other for 3 months, bringing an end to their 3-year relationship. Honestly, mate, it's probably for the best. It's for both sides. Come on now. That's too much. They're in prison for the rest of their life. Anyway, this has been another episode of The Casual Criminalist. Thank you, Emma, for writing it. Thank you, Jen, for editing it. Thank you to me for reading it. I have the easy part. I got the easy job. If you like this show and you're watching it on YouTube, please do like, subscribe, all of that malarkey. If you're listening as a podcast, a review is always appreciated. I see it. We got 5 stars on Spotify, a perfect score with 5, 6, 7,000 reviews, something like that. It was 6,000 or 5,000 something a while ago, so I just assume it's ticked up. Probably has. Thank you, everybody, for the reviews. I appreciate them. I read them. I love them. And I'll see you next time.